Shalom. So this is a PSHAT teaching on a topic. We're coming up on the festival of Rosh Hashanah, and something really fascinating. Because, my ministry, that's what I'm trying to do by having read broadly, is to, reunification of the house of Israel. That's what the Father's doing. So I would rather work with him than against him. But there is a really fascinating piece of information. And actually, my husband saw this in the scriptures years ago. My husband of blessed memory. And I went back and revisited it again. And lo and behold, it really is truth that is astounding. The Father is, he's in control of everything. So, and someday when we get to heaven, we'll realize why a lot of things remain to be as they are. And also why all things do work together for good. But, I was looking at, this is Rosh Hashanah coming up, right? Now, Rosh Hashanah is, not to get too deep here, but people need to understand things. I did a YouTube video a little bit ago that about the calendar. And there are like 4 calendars that are in use in the totality of depicting what the texts are telling us, all right? But the most popular heads of the year are in Nisan 1 and Tishri 1. Now, Rosh Hashanah is coming up on Tishri 1, which is, again, that's the 7th month, and it's, usually in September, late September, early October, depending on how the calendar is going. But it is, and this is my opinion, Rosh Hashanah, let me start at Nisan 1, which we get the first festival of Passover from. Totally integral to the story of Messiah. He is our Passover lamb. Nisan 1 is the month when you start counting for this festival. Now, what it really comes down to is Nisan 1 is the head of the months. All right, because you always have it, the new moon is the beginning of a new month. Now, the thing about Tishri 1, the moon is very close. It's not always coming up on a new moon. So there's a lot of mystery. What I'm trying to say is a lot of mystery, but I think this is a piece of the puzzle most people have no clue about, which is very interesting. So anyways, so what you can, and it's the beginning of an agricultural, the months and they count the festivals from Nisan 1. But when you get to Tishri, it has a whole different, it's the head of the year. Remember, we're following a lunar solar calendar. And the head of the year is usually associated with the head with Tishri 1. Now, Tishri 1 is also equated with a lot of people. There's not a lot of information. I mean, there's tons of information about Passover and the spring festivals. Rosh Hashanah is kind of a hidden festival. There's not like a lot about it. There's like 2 verses, one in Numbers, and I forget where the other one is. And it talks about to blow the trumpet and to, basically to acknowledge and convene. Most of there's not a lot of ritual with it. You can have a festive meal. The main thing is you blow the shofar. You can have a festive meal, light candles, you can add things to it, but ultimately it's a kind of mysterious festival. But it also was the beginning for counting of kings. All right. There was a civil, and it's very important. And this has very important to count the reigns of kings. All right. Because a lot of times that's how we track empires or through the reign of kings. All right. So what is important about Tishri 1, though? I noticed that this is the year 5782. All right. If you go to any, Jewish site, and they always give you the year 5782. Now, there's a very important biblical principle that I don't think really you can have any argument to stand against it, because it's so clear. It only takes 2 witnesses in scripture, 2 to 3 witnesses. There are dozens of witnesses, and also in the extra biblical books, in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, in early Christian writings, everywhere you look, there is so much to indicate that a day with Adonai is 1,000 years, okay? And there's a very THOUSAND, 1,000 years. In Psalms, it says, a day is as 1,000 years. I mean, you can't get more clear than that. There's many different countings. Again, you get into 7 years making a Shemitah, 50 years making a Jubilee, 24 hours making a completed Gilgal or cycle. There's 12 hours for a day, 12 hours for a night. There's all these different ways of subdividing time. But one thing is very clear is that a biblical day is 1,000 years. Now, if you follow archetypes, which is the main thing you have to get in to get truth, is to get the archetype. Because if you really get the correct archetype, then you're pretty sure you can follow through where it's used in other instances. So this is where we get especially the concept, 7 days in a week, right? Which is a complete cycle, counting weeks and years, you see. But it's 7 days, right? And then what do we do on the 7th day? That is known as Shabbat, right? Extreme. And this translates into the millennial reign. There's tons of absolutely perfect exegesis explaining that the day of rest on the 7th day after creation, the Father rested. Now, it's my opinion, again, if people understood the tree of life, that's why I teach this. This is the absolute foundational biblical exegesis. This is the starting point. This is what our prophets knew and used and coded everything to fit on the tree of life. So they always knew where they were if something was correct because they knew the archetypes. But I don't want to. Anyways, within these 7 days and then Shabbat, right? The Father put in a system. He created. On 6 days, he's working. He's making something, right? What he made was a whole universe, seen and unseen, that was going to run like clockwork and was going to basically do everything he needed it to do. So what on the 7th day, after you've made something, right, you usually rest from your labor. You sit back and you enjoy it, or you just let it do its thing. So he rested. It isn't like, he took a nap or something. The system was already set up. That is the system. All right. So the calendar, if we're going to do a day as 1,000 years, and it's pretty clear in scripture that 6,000 years we labor, and on the 7th day we have a rest. And you can immediately translate into the concept there are 6,000 years of human history or of Adamic salvation history before we get back to a place of rest. All right. When it says to work out your salvation, right? We're told the fear and trembling. We have to work at it. Just like the Father worked to make the system. But on the 7th day is a day of rest. But so how can that be? Now, according to our calendar, Western and Eastern, different, the Mayans have a different year. There's different years, quote unquote, we're at. But for our sakes, let's take the Jewish calendar, which says we're at the year 5,782, and the Christian year, which says we're at 2021, right? Okay, which is we know 2,002 days. See, that's where we get it. 2 days since Yeshua, then we get 2,000 AD. Since that finished work. Okay, but we do know that there are 6,000 years of Adamic history. So and even the rabbis testify 100% that there's they call it 2,000 years of chaos up until Moshe. Then there was 2,000 years of Torah, and they call since the destruction of the temple, or since the finished work of Yeshua, will, depending on your perspective, there's been 2,000 years. They call the footsteps of Messiah, or the days of Messiah. All right. Even Hosea clearly testifies that for 2 days he will kind of work with us, and on the 3rd day he will revive us. I mean, there's so many hints. Those are all hints. Everything what I'm saying is kind of in the category of Remez. But my point with this is, if you lose the PSHAT, which is if you lose the clear meaning, oh my gosh, that's exactly why Yeshua said no man's going to know the day or hour, because we have so lost the PSHAT. But I'll show you that. So that in essence, if you do the math, there's 218 years. Here, let's go to a different color. because that's what we're dealing with. There's a big difference. There's 218 years between 6,000 and year 5782. So either we're 200 years away from the return of Messiah, which, man, that really, I'm not going to go with that number just anyways, because I can't wait another 200 years. I don't think the world will endure that much longer. But how can you have such a huge discrepancy? Now, this is known. And I did research, and I'm going to put a little link in this video, because you really, if you want, especially for people who are very linear and want every single example, there's a thorough, no reason for me to reinvent the wheel, thorough dissertation on this discrepancy I'm talking about that includes writings, both sides, Old Testament, New Testament, the Talmud, the Mishnah, even secular, like the Persians, how they say things. Okay, so it's very clear there's a problem. Houston, we have a problem. We have to account for 218 years, all right? How could there be such a huge discrepancy? No, of course nobody would know the day or if you're 218 years off, yeah, nobody's going to know the day or the hour, okay? And it's a mystery, okay? And I'm not laying blame anywhere because it's a mystery. But how did this happen? All right, and even Jewish scholarship today, honest, intellectually honest Jewish scholarship, there are tons of witnesses within the camp of Judah that say they know this. They know the calendar is wrong. There's a huge discrepancy. The question is why, and the question, where did we get off? And basically, most scholars will give it to the time of the 2nd century. There was and you have to say a lot of the writings are being done to preserve, when the temple was destroyed, and you had the huge storehouses of the books and everything. These people were being dispersed over the whole earth. Judah, whose responsibility is to keep Torah, that's their birthright. They had to come up with a system, and they wrote down as much as they could to record for all future generations, which includes us. But one of the things that really kind of probably did happen, because we're still dealing with men. I absolutely believe in the sanctity and the high esteem that our Torah sages should be held in. Nobody is a greater defender of the tradition, both oral and written, that's been kept within the house of Judah. But it's pretty clear because, and this is one of the areas where even the secular historians and people who really don't have, as I say, a dog in the race, will all agree there's something wrong with this, the chronologies, the counting of the kings. In Persian, the Jews in their counting, especially during the time of Rabbi Akiva, who was responsible for writing down a portion of I think it's the Mishnah, which was recording this, only attributed, I think, 34 years, okay, to the Persian dynasties, to the Persian, a subjugation, because that's what they're doing. They're counting like how many years this king was over, so it was Seleucid, or whether it was, Hasmonean, or whether it was Greek, or whether it was Roman, or whether it was, Babylonian, or Egyptian, okay? This is the point. You want to keep track of these things. But there really were, by all records, there should have been counted in here 165 years, give or take. I read the thing, it's 166, 168 to 163, okay? I mean, we're in the zone. So this is what was recorded within the Jewish texts, attributed mostly to Rabbi Akiva. This is what actually is recorded in true history, okay? So why? How did this happen? Because if we really are close, and this is the point, Israel today is at messianic fever pitch. If they still really had and believe that they had 218 years to go, it's a little early to get excited, okay? So there's really something going on, something that, these are a lot of remesses, there's hints to something much deeper. And so what I just want to say here is that this discrepancy of 34 years versus 165, all right, has to do with the mystery of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, I believe, because one thing that's really is the Rosh Hashanah, if you're counting kings, who is the ultimate king? The ultimate king is the Mashiach, right? And I'm sure if you listen to my teachers and your kids, and this is absolutely biblically factual, it's deep biblical understanding. You're just not going to get it by a cursory Sunday school, one verse theology type of reading. But there are three messiahs clearly delineated in the whole picture of salvation history. All right, you have a Messiah ben Joseph, a Messiah ben David, and you have a high priest. All of them factor in 100% in the totality of the picture of the salvation work that needs to be done. So when Paul, and I just want to go into this, see, one of the things is there, and this is the prophets are clear on this. I would say the prophets are not confused. We're the ones that are confused. Obviously, we're confused, all right? Both houses, all right, again, you have to understand the two houses of Israel. The father, through Jacob, when he conferred the birthright blessing onto the 12 sons, he totally gave the firstborn. These are all things that are in my YouTube teachings. I have many playlists on this. One of them is I have a video, a playlist on some of my important teachings. All right, you don't have to list it all over 400 of them, but there's a couple that you'll get the gist. But understanding that the birthright and the blessing are two different things. They were together with Abraham, but they were separated out. Judah got the scepter and Ephraim got the blessing, or you could say the birthright went to Judah and the blessing went to Ephraim, and that morphed into totally different people groups on the planet doing totally different works on this trajectory. So it takes a really big picture to put this back together. But when both houses by the prophets are accused of harboring lies, right? How would you get this discrepancy unless, and even today I have to say, and this will come out, Judah is harboring a lie. But don't think, Ephraim, that you're not. All right. So it's not, and this is what Paul's always trying to say, look, don't be prideful, don't be arrogant. You both are beloved of the Father, but you both have, so there are issues. The Father has issues. All right. And because of the lies in both houses, Jeremiah 23:14, he is, very clear. Jeremiah saying, look, he has seen the prophets in Jerusalem. Prophets in Jerusalem is a clear reference to the house of Judah. Jerusalem was their baby, their jurisdiction. The temple worship was in their territory. They were responsible for it. So if these are prophets in Jerusalem who walk in harlotry and walk in lies. See, when Yeshua came in, he had an issue with some of the traditions, some of the lies, not every Pharisee, not the whole picture, but they had some areas of blindness. Even then it could be pointed out. Even today, this is an area of blindness. Now, even though I said the scholars really do recognize it, it's not corrected amongst the rabbinic authorities. Now, I'm sure by the end it will be, but so but in Hosea, who is a prophet to the northern kingdom, it's established that is really who he was speaking to. Jeremiah spoke a lot to both houses, but Hosea primarily spoke, it says in Hosea 7:13, in the big keyword, tip-off, and he talks about Ephraim. Ephraim is a total code word for the northern kingdom. All right, Ephraim was the lead tribe. He's the one who received the birthright blessing from Jacob, sons of Joseph. So it says, he will chastise them because they have spoken lies against me. They rebel against me. So, I could have gone with 10 or 15 scriptures. I just pulled out these to prove my point. It's there. The prophet, there is error in both houses, and we have all suffered because of this error. There's a famous verse that says, Ephraim has inherited lies from their fathers. People, Christians who get into Hebrew roots and realize that, oh my gosh, most of it, we got a real made up pagan kind of religion in a lot of ways. It's a fact, but oh well. The Father doesn't mean he's not going to love you. It just means that if you want correct theology, you're the one who's going to have to adjust. So one of the things here too I want to say is that Paul, when he, and this is very clear, I just want to make this point again for, in terms of the house of Judah, even though they had, and it's clear in Romans 9:3-4, Paul affirms, even though he knows he's going into this huge ministry to get the lost sheep of the house of Israel, many of them scattered amongst the Gentiles. It's a huge work. The footsteps of Messiah has been going on for 2,000 years. The ingathering of the multiplied seed. But he says here, he reiterates. He said, look at my brother Judah, the Jews. And he says, I'm a Benjamite. Now, if you understand your history, Judah and Benjamin, with many Levites, really made up the core of the house of Judah after the split between Jeroboam and Rehoboam. All right. And so that's why Benjamin's territory was right next to Judah. And there's also a very much of a relationship with Judah taking on and taking under his wing Benjamin when Joseph got sold off into slavery. So there's a lot of hints of this relationship. But he says theirs is the adoption as sons, but it's really the firstborn sons. We're talking about firstborns. And I have a lot of videos on this. You need to understand this is the covenant that Yahweh made with Adam that is saying, as a firstborn, you are responsible. You are the leader of all the sons of God, all his creation. Okay, and that was a placeholder that Adam had. He lost it to a certain extent, but the firstborn has always been a concept within the scriptures, and this explains a lot because they are given huge responsibility. Remember, to whom much has been given, much is required. That's why you always see Judah in such a prominent role. That's why you always see Ephraim, the northern kingdom. Joshua comes from the tribe of Ephraim. All right, in the two spies, Caleb comes from the house of Judah. Joshua comes from the house of Ephraim. These are the leaders of the clans, of the tribes. But he says, so theirs is the adoption as firstborn. They have a portion of the firstborn birthright conferred on them. Theirs is the glory. They have always had the Shekinah. In the temple, you remember that in the tabernacle too, the Shekinah filled, the glory filled the temple, filled the tabernacle. That's a reference to the Ruach HaKodesh. Another Hebrew word is the Shekinah. All right. Theirs is the covenant. Judah has always kept track of and functioned within the categories of the Noahide, the Abraham, the covenant he made at Sinai with Moshe. All right. You got to understand how, again, Ephraim was divorced, cut off, sent away. Fast forward. Well, I'll get there. Theirs is the temple service. Okay. Again, the temple was in the southern kingdom, in Jerusalem. They were the stewards of it. The priests, the Levites that stayed there, they functioned in that temple. And all of the enactment as above, so below, everything was being done. It is as a priestly representative of atoning work that was going on. And theirs is the messianic promises. It just says theirs are the promises. Well, listen, what other promises? Again, we're talking about the largest, most important categories, the messianic promises, that the Messiah would come to the line of Judah. All right. And when you get into Yeshua's whole lineage, that's why you find Judah, the lineage of Judah, you find the lineage of Ephraim, and you find the lineage of the high priest. It's all in there because it would have to be. So it's very important to understand these things. And Paul is saying that because of it's a mystery, but where he is seeing something very deep and profound in this time now of the footsteps of Messiah. All right, where the good news of the gospel, people, is, you remember the parable of the prodigal son? Judah, he says to the older brother, you've never left me. You've always been in the house. You've always been in covenant relationship with me. Your brother out there, is a different story. And so the mystery was that because the Gentiles this was their season. It was all prophesying, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Hosea, Ezekiel, that the Father was going to woo them back into a covenanted relationship. That's the good news. The good news of the gospel is that this Messiah ben Joseph came and went out as a shepherd, and that is the pictograph, to gather back in these lost sheep, and not just gather them in, but put them on equal status again with the firstborn status that Judah had. They also have a firstborn status upon them. So they're covenanted back in. And these things are really important. So, but to go full circle, to go back to the concept of Rosh Hashanah and why that it's very encrypted for a reason. There's not because in hindsight's always the best way to see anything, right? You can look at the whole. That's why prophecy is best looked in hindsight, because you can see how it's played out through centuries. See things, we think that everything's happening in our generation, the whole end times. I say the day of, something is the day of the Lord, but the last 2 days, it's very important to understand, these last 2,000 years have been strictly focused on the ingathering of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, bringing them back into covenant with who? Yahweh Elohim, the high God of Israel. And the calendar, one of the things is they say that because, the bad blood that started to happen between the two houses, and the way the gospel of Yeshua as this Messiah for these lost sheep became to be corrupted and became to be a Gentile thing, not a Jewish thing. It became to be this Gentile thing. And believe me, the Gentiles have darkened minds. That's what the Torah tells us, all right? It became to distance itself more and more from true Hebraic understanding, which Judah has kept. They kept in the house. Remember the covenants, the law. That's another thing that Paul says. They kept the law, all right? So one of the things that's important to understand is, so they say that Rabbi Akiva did not want, because it's very clear in Daniel, all right, if you do the 69 weeks and Messiah will be cut off, if you have the correct timeline, you would very clearly see Yeshua came right at the time, right at the appointed time, all right? But in order to distance themselves from this Messiah, they had to, or they did, that on a PSHAT level, I mean, what else can you say? Maybe they did change and fudge a little bit on the histories, on the counting of the kings, so that they left out 165 years of Persian rule, all right? Which every scholar, it's absolutely unanimous. And many Jewish scholars see and say the same thing. So I'm not making any of this up. But why would, on a deeper level, why would that happen? Well, one thing, it's because we're children, right? And, the whole idea is if there's a parable that says, if the master of the house or the steward of the house knew what time the master was going to be coming home, he makes sure everything was in order, all right? But we're not like that. A lot of times we will, if the parents go out, we have fun. And then if we know they're coming home at 10 o'clock, we run around and clean up the house and get everything to look spiffy again. See, this is the thing. If we really knew this day and hour 100%, we would probably, sin right up into the last minute and then, make sure that we were in the right trajectory. I mean, it's just sort of human nature. There's a lot, and also because it says that these things are hidden. These things, this is intel that the Father has for two reasons. One, because of human nature, it takes away the concept of just being disciplined and doing the right thing, even when nobody's looking. Even when the parents aren't in the house, it doesn't matter. You will still do the right thing. That's called integrity. That's called, but maybe if the parents are away and you think you really have a lot of time, you can get away with something. And that really is the history of both houses. But another deeper meaning is in Daniel. It says that to seal up, all right, to seal up, to hide, to encrypt a lot of the knowledge. There is an element that if everybody knew, even the enemy does not know when the wrap up is, when his ultimate demise is. All right, because we know in the millennial realm, if you're going to have a time of rest, the major thing you've got to lock up is the Hasatan that's creating all the chaos in the house. All right, so there could be just a deeper reason in all this, and I don't put it past the deeper, especially the mystical sages who understand things on many levels, not just on the PSHAT level. Okay, that there is an element of surprise and confusion that go with a lot of prophecy. And so Yeshua is saying nobody knows the day or the hour except the Father in heaven. And not even the angels know it. Good and bad angels, people. No, the rabbis, the sages didn't know it, got confused. And even, he said, basically the people aren't going to know. Because we're dealing with an absolute end of the age. What we do know is we will know the season. And a season is a very hard thing to miss. You'd have to literally be not just blind, deaf, dumb, and blind, not because you can feel the wind change. I mean, I can, when you go from August to September, you can just even feel that the wind changes. There's so many subtle ways. So by knowing the season, you're still without excuse. Day or hour, that's a little different. That's a much more highly encrypted time frame, much more specific. But suffice it to say, I don't think that's the correct Jewish year. Obviously, we really are close at the end of 2,000 years. And then again, we got 21 years added to it. But then again, you could always, like I said, 165 years. If you take, let me just do the math, take 218 years, you take away the 165 years, you're still left with 53 years to account for. And there's all sorts of discrepancies. I mean, in things that the scholars or the sages don't agree on, like how old was Terah when he had Abraham? Was he 70 or was he 130? You could easily get 53 years discrepancy through many, many different conflicting understandings. We are not Elohim. We do not keep perfect track. And this is why one of the two major admonitions the Father gives both houses is do not say racha to your brother, which is because you'll be in danger of hellfire. Lashon hara, which is evil speech, which is something that's rampant amongst religious people. And that's what the world looks at us and says, oh, man, you are a bunch of, because we don't give enough grace to people who disagree with us. All right. And then the evil speech is to really denigrate and to impinge on the character of the person you disagree with. Rampant today, especially between, in our political system, rampant. And it's a very, very serious sin. So like I said, both houses have plenty to account for in the day of judgment. But I think with more information, I say like this Rosh Hashanah, because this is a very hidden piece in the sense that the king is coming at the appointed time. Truly, the Father knows when the 6,000 years are up. Absolutely. And there will be a trump. It's Yom Teruah. It is the Feast of Trumpets. That's what you do, because we are told that at the last trump, when the trump is blown, that's it. The king descends, and we're into a whole new era. So on that note, happy Rosh Hashanah, happy New Year, happy New Year of counting of the true King who will come at the appointed time. Of that we can have faith, and I absolutely believe we're in the season, and we need to look up because our redemption draweth nigh. So on that note, shalom, shalom, and I will see you hopefully in the next video.